bolts. Now we're going to unclip and pull the rear cover off. We're going to remove the tailpipe assembly. Remove the 2 bolts mounting the muffler to the header. Then we're going to slide the muffler out of the 3 mounts this way and carefully work it out of the vehicle. Tilt the muffler with the tailpipe going up and pull it out the back. We're going to remove all the 10mm bolts holding the belt cover on. Next, we're going to make sure that the dampener is out of the way of removing this bolt to take the timing cover tensioner, factory timing cover tensioner off. If this bolt is covered up by the dampener, you'll have to rotate the engine around by hand to access that bolt. You can see the cover has a factory O-ring that's going to be left in place. Make sure it's in the groove. This bolt can be left in place, or you can restart the bolt after you're done, as the cover plates are slotted to just slide onto the bolt. Locate the HSM billet oil fill / turbo drain plate. The fitting should already be previously installed. If you're not installing a turbo kit and just using this for the oil fill, obviously there'll be 2 plugs here. Bolts to 80 inch-pounds, which is not very tight. Bolts holding on the alternator cover.
This will be one of 3 minor plastic cuts you'll have to make. You can see with the silver line where you'll have to modify the alternator cover to fit the intercooler pipe.
Install the alternator cover. The bottom bolt back here on the back of the alternator cover, we're just going to install it loose because there's a clamp that goes on it for the turbo oil feed line. Install the factory belt cover using the factory hardware.
For the next step, you're going to locate the turbo support bracket and the 1/2 inch hardware.
Install turbo support bracket in between 2 grommets. We put a little bit of Vaseline in the grommets to help the 1/2 inch bolt slide through into the bracket.
Next, you're going to locate the turbo adapter elbow, the hardware, and then you're going to take the 2 factory exhaust springs off of the factory hardware.
You're going to locate the new provided Polaris factory exhaust donut. You're going to twist and pull this one off the pipe and slide the new one on, just like the factory one was. We are not going to replace the one on this machine because this machine has 2 miles on it. Install your turbo adapter flange to show. We're going to make sure that the turbo adapter flange is lined up perfectly parallel to the machine, and then when we tighten our hardware down, we're going to make sure the gap is the same all the way around the flange. Hand tighten your 3/8 hardware. What you want to do is seat this down on the gasket and pull these bolts down evenly by hand to where the gap is the same on the top and the bottom, and the flanges are square to each other. You don't want to over tighten these so it smashes the flange. You'll feel it when the bolts start to get tight. It's hard to give you an exact torque spec because of the spring and the gasket that's in the behind the adapter piece.
Next, you're going to locate your turbocharger. The turbocharger out of the box will already have the oil feed line adapter installed. It'll have the drain line fitting installed, as well as your coolant fittings installed. You will also want to grab your supplied clamp as well.
Slide your V-band clamp down on your turbo adapter pipe. Go ahead ahead and mount your turbocharger up in place. Put your clamp on around your turbo flange and just snug this down. For right now, we just want it snug so we can still rotate the turbocharger just slightly.
Next, you're going to locate your turbo oil drain line. Note, this drain line is one of our prototype drain lines. The one in your kit may look slightly different than this one.
Install your turbo oil drain line on the dash 8 fitting on the bottom of the turbo and to your HSM timing billet timing cover mount.
Next, you're going to find your exhaust pipe and supplied V-band clamp.
You're going to go ahead and loosen these two 13mm headed bolts up so that you've got a little bit of play in your exhaust hanger. We're going to hang our exhaust V-band clamp on the turbine flange. Then we're going to work our exhaust pipe carefully. Up into place. Go ahead and put a little bit of Vaseline or grease on your grommet here so that your pin slides through, your hanger slides through easily. Slide that through. And then this is going to butt up with your turbocharger if your turbocharger once again is clocked correctly. It should fit nice and flat and easy. Go ahead and install your V-band clamp. After you've got your V-band clamp snugged up on your exhaust pipe and your exhaust pipe in its hanger, you can still see that the turbocharger and everything is kind of adjustable. What you're going to want to do is make sure the exhaust pipe back here is about just under a finger width away from the frame, pretty close to your turbo adapter pipe. And then we're going to get our rear cover before we actually snug everything up, now that it's in place, just to make sure the exhaust pipe is centered. Go ahead and snap your rear cover back in place really quick. Make sure your exhaust pipe is where you like it. As you can see, if it's not centered, you can adjust it just slightly with the hanger. And then we're going to pop the exhaust cover back off now that we like it. It's recommended just to hand torque them all down to just snug.
Next, you're going to locate your oil feed line, fitting, and clamp. One thing to note on the fitting that's supplied, we will send it assembled just like this, but you want to make sure that that washer is flat on your fitting and that the O-ring is sitting flat on top of the washer. There's a little shoulder on this fitting that the washer needs to stay around. So just an item of note.
The factory oil filter shield, just so we can access the fitting better down in there with our hands. So right here is the fitting we're going to be removing for the oil feed. We're just going to take some compressed air and just blow off this area so there's no debris around that may get in the oil. Grab an old shop ragger towel and just stick it down underneath that oil fitting. You will lose just a tiny bit of oil just to keep the mess minimal. Go ahead and just snug up your oil feed fitting now. Said probably only about 18 foot-pounds. You don't need to get crazy with it. Line and get it started on there. And once you get your oil feed line down to just barely snug to where you can still rotate it, we're just going to rotate it kind of up towards the oil dipstick. This area right here, because it's going to run up the back right here behind your alternator, and And then you can go ahead, grab your 5/8 wrench and your 9/16 socket to tighten the line down itself. You don't want to just tighten the line without holding the fitting, just in fear of actually the bottom fitting at moving again and stripping out. Clean up your dirty rag and your waste oil, and that step is done.
After you tighten up your feed line and fitting, make sure that the line itself is not touching the chassis.
And go ahead and run your oil feed line up the back of the alternator. There's a nice little cavity for it to poke out up there. Make sure you get all the loops and everything out of your oil line. Make sure it's run where you'd like it. And we're going to go ahead and attach it to the oil feed fitting on the very top of the turbo. You're going to want it and then tighten that fitting up. Find your 3/8 rubber loop clamp, put it around your turbo oil feed. Now the bolt that you left loose on the alternator shield in the previous step, you're going to mount the loop clamp to the back of that. Put the bolt back in. And then we're just gonna hand tighten that, obviously.
Next, you're going to locate your two coolant lines. For this step right now, we're only going to use one of these lines. You're going to take your line that has the straight fitting on it, and we're going to partially install it for now.
We've located our turbo coolant line with the straight fitting on it. We're going to route it just behind the turbocharger here and hook it to the coolant port right there on the back side of the turbocharger. Go ahead and tighten that fitting up. Just route your line down over here to the side of the motor for now. We're going to hook it into the cooling system later.
For the next step, you're going to come back to your coolant lines. You should have one left with a 90-degree fitting on it. So you're going to pick up this line as well as your two 1/2-inch hose clamps.
Good. Route your 90-degree coolant hose with your other coolant hose that's already been run down the side of the motor. Then we're going to run that over the top side of the turbocharger. And we're going to connect this hose to the back water port of the turbocharger. Coolant lines is going to intercept this coolant hose right here, and what we've got is some hose pliers that you can pinch off the hose. We're actually going to try and cut the hose right where it makes this nice little bend here. So we're going to pinch off the coolant flow on the bottom. And pinch it off on the top. And And then we're gonna go ahead and cut our hose right here. There's still gonna be a little bit of antifreeze that comes out, but the mesh should be minimal now. Cutters, we're gonna go ahead and cut our hose right back in here. We're gonna take the longer of the two cooling lines that comes from the turbocharger down underneath the motor mount and run it up. Don't forget to put your hose clamp on the hose and hook it into the coolant line we just cut. It's going downwards from the motor. We're going to take the shorter of the two lines and hook it into the upper portion of the hose coming back. Then go ahead and just tighten your clamps up. We're just going to take these hoses, we're going to route them up here. Route that one down with your oil feed line and just go ahead and then zip tie all that up nice. So we've got to remove the passenger side rear speaker. There's a plug over here on the side. Just unplug, get the speaker out of the way. Now we're going to remove our intake boot right here. We've got one pinch clamp to get the PCV hose off, and then two clamps, one on the throttle body and one on the air box. And you can usually just loosen the hose. And what we can do is just pull the clamps off and pull the boot back, and it'll be easier to pull the hose itself off. Good. Now with the speaker removed, we're going to take the rubber access plug out to access the coolant reservoir fill cap. Go ahead and remove the cap. So we're going to use a vacuum tool to drain it. So now we're going to get our hose clamp pliers and clamp our coolant reservoir hose as well. We're going to drain the coolant reservoir. We've actually got a fluid evacuation device that will go on the top and suck the coolant out. There's a couple different ways you can do it. If you don't have that, obviously you can pinch the hose off, take the clamp off, pull the hose off, and hurry and cap the bottom just so you keep it as less messy as possible. And we're going to remove our clamp on the hose on the bottom of the coolant reservoir. Slide it down because we will reuse it. We're going to remove the Torx bolt right here on the top of the coolant reservoir that's kind of hidden, and so we can remove the coolant reservoir. And then we're going to remove the last bolt on the coolant reservoir. It's kind of right here on the back side, just right underneath that hose. So after you've removed the bolt here, unclip the hose out of its thing. There's two pinch clamps on the vent hoses. We're just going to undo those and pull the vent hoses off, and then we can remove the factory coolant reservoir. Down and out the back, and then finish pulling our hose off. We're now going to remove our PCV hose, the hose that ran up to the intake boot, and we're going to save it as we're going to reroute it and use it for later.
Next, you're going to grab your HSM throttle body boot and 3 1/4 inch T-bolt clamp.
You can either take your throttle body boot and feed it up from down there, or you can come in this way. Make sure your T-bolt clamp's installed so it's straight up and accessible and not over here by the throttle actuator.
Next, you're going to locate your new injectors as well as your new map sensor. When you open up the injectors, obviously you're going to have injectors in here as well as these clips. You are not going to use these.
We're going to change out the injectors, and what we're going to do is just do these one by one instead of taking the whole rail out. It's just easier. Start with unclipping the blue connector block, pushing down on the lock, and then releasing that fuel line. You can just see the fuel rail draining into the rag there. And then your injector connectors have these little red locks on them. If you get a 90-degree pick and you just go right under the lock and kind of just wiggle and lift up, you'll see that pop up and unlock. And you can just release the lock there and pull the connector off and get it out of the way. So we're going to remove our 4 hold-down bolts here to hold the fuel rail in. It's easiest to do with a little 8mm wobbly socket to get on them there. gonna go ahead and just kind of lift up and then wiggle that fuel rail, and you'll see the injectors come out. You can just hold it up just like that. They've got little clips holding them on. You just go ahead and push that with your fingers towards the engine. Catch it, you see the clip came off, and then you can pop the injector out. As you can see, the factory injector we took out has a longer nozzle on it than the replacement injector. That doesn't make a difference at all, so don't freak out. These are correct. These are the correct injectors for this application. And then if you just take and put a little bit of Vaseline or grease or something on these O-rings, it makes the install much easier when you go to put the O-rings back in there. And then you can just put your, as you can see, the clip will go back right into place like it should hold the injector in. You can kind of reference it to the next one to make sure you've got it back in the correct groove. And then we'll move on to doing the next one and so forth on the next three. All right, after you've got all 4 of your new injectors installed, you verified all the clips are locked into the correct positions, we're gonna put our injectors back down in their respective ports. If you just kind of wiggle and push, you'll see it snap right down into place. And you can adjust it so your bolt holes are lined up. And go ahead and just put your injector hold down bolts back in and tighten them up. Then we'll plug all our injector connectors back in, make sure they click into place, and push the little red locks down. We'll reconnect our fuel feed line to the rail, make sure it snaps into place, and then lock your little blue clip back up. Your injector install's done. All right, locate your brand new provided map sensor. Just gonna unlock the factory connector and disconnect it. Remove your factory map sensor. Just go ahead and kind of twist and rock and install your new map sensor into the manifold there. Make sure you just hand tighten that to snug. It doesn't need to be crazy. Plug your map sensor connector back in and that's done.
For the next step, for the cooler, you're going to want to find your mounting plate, your mounting bracket, the cooler itself, your inlet and outlet fitting, and your hardware.
Grab your -12AN to 10 ORB O-ring fittings. Put a little bit of Vaseline or grease on the fittings once again. We're going to install them in the cooler. And then snug them up. Next, we're going to locate all our 5/16 hardware for cooler bracket. Once again, it doesn't matter really which way this thing goes. I usually mount it with the wiring facing downward. Once you've got your bracket installed on your cooler, just go ahead and tighten your 6 bolts up. And you want to locate the same 5/16 hardware for your lower bracket, and you can see the lower bracket's got the holes are offset just a little bit. They're not right in the dead center. You want that to be going the offset towards the rear of the car. And you can go ahead and tighten this bracket hardware as well. And your cooler's ready to be installed into the car. We've got our cooler assembly going in now. It goes right back where you just took your seatbelt bounce off. And then your seatbelt tab goes right back on top of the cooler bracket. Make sure your seatbelt's not twisted. You put that back in. So now that we've got our cooler mounted, we've got two small little trim steps here for our cooler hoses. You can see we've taken our one hose with the 90 on it. It's not going to fit completely, obviously. We've just started it on here a thread so that you can just kind of see where it's got to go, where you've got to trim. So just mark that and trim that with a plastic trimmer. And then on this side over here, what we're going to do is just kind of elongate that hole to make room for the other hose to go down. We're going to locate our factory reservoir coolant cap cover there, our fill cover, kind of put it back into place, and as you can see where we've just trimmed this for this hose, we do need to just notch that out a little bit too. So just draw yourself a line. You can go trim that with, it's just rubber, the razor blade or whatever works easiest for you. Now we're just going to reinstall that and snap it back down into its location. So I'm going to take our factory speaker. We're going to move it back into position. I'm not going to snap it in place just yet because we've got to get our hose started. We're going to go ahead and run our hose down that hole. It's actually a route down the frame rail on the outside of the sway bar. Just stuff it down there. And while the speaker is loose, it's kind of a tight fit as you can see. We've got to get our hose started. Just go ahead and get your factory speaker, pop that down into place. And like we said with the hose and the factory speaker, and if you have an aftermarket cage, that can be kind of a tight fit to get that all go back down in there, but once you get it in there, then just go ahead and tighten your fitting up. If you haven't done it already, remove these two pop clips and remove the vent cover for the intake. Locate the supplied reservoir template with your kit and your coolant reservoir. You're just going to lay this down in that triangular shape right there. Not super crucial, but get all the lines should line up. Go ahead and mark your 3 holes and then drill your holes. And we're going to mount our coolant reservoir using the supplied bolts in it right there. And using a 10mm socket, just go ahead and snug up your bolts. Go ahead and take your vent cover, snap it back down into place, and reinstall your 2 little pop clips.
Next, you're going to locate the water pump, hardware, and spacer.
So we're going to get our water pump, and it's going to mount in that location right there on the cover for the clutch. As you can see, this thing's pretty wobbly. We're just going to make a mark about 2 3/4 in from this edge and about 1 1/2 down. It's not real crucial where the pump goes because it's just got hoses that go to it, so it could be actually mounted kind of anywhere on here. That's just where we chose to mount it. And you can see it's very flexible here, so you can actually move it out and drill your hole in it instead of having to maybe use a right angle drill. That's going to end up being a 1/4 inch hole. So just locate your spacer. Your spacer is going to mount under the water pump, just to space it up off of that. Go ahead and mount it that direction so that the inlet is facing the engine. And then the nice thing about this is you can see how this is kind of flops around. Once we actually hook our hoses to it, it really stabilizes out that bracket so it doesn't rattle. So once you get your water pump oriented in this rubber grommet, you can actually turn it in the rubber grommet to orient where the hoses or where your outlet hose is going to come out. I'm taking our 1/4 inch spacer, or our aluminum spacer here, our 1/4 inch hardware, mounted the water pump, run the hoses down, the one to the inlet, the one to the outlet, and then we run them over here. You can see we've both brought them down here out of the way of the sway bar, and they will zip tie together down this direction and zip tie uniformly however you like.
Next, you're going to locate your straight 2.5 inch pipe and your 90-degree 2.5 inch boot.
It's all into your silicone boots. You can just take some glass cleaner and spray a good liberal amount, and it'll make installing it onto the piping so much easier, and also makes it easy so it'll spin in there and adjust. Also up in the boot, if you can get it, just make this so much easier to install. You're going to install your straight section of pipe up here into the throttle body boot. And then we're just going to kind of leave that all right there until we get our intercooler in and adjusted.
Next, you're going to locate your intercooler, bracket, and hardware.
You're going to remove your center motor mount bolt here. Go ahead and install your intercooler bracket with the spacer on the back side of the bracket. And we're just going to snug it up so it'll just still adjust, so we can lay our intercooler in there and get everything adjusted before we torque the bolt. So again, we'll spray a bunch of glass cleaner down the boot on the end of the intercooler. And your intercooler is going to mount with the hoses going down towards the bottom of the engine. Oops. Go ahead and get it started in your boot down here. And then your little rubber grommet's going to go in between the intercooler and the bolt. Then once we get everything adjusted and all our pipes and boots hooked up here, we're going to go ahead and torque this hardware down.
Next, you're going to locate your last intercooler pipe, your straight 2.5-inch boot, and your 2 to 2.5-inch 90-degree boot.
Go ahead, hit your boot, some glass cleaner again. The straight one's going to go on the other end of the intercooler here. Hit your 90-degree boot as well, some glass cleaner on both ends. As you can see, there's a boost port in this pipe for boost reference if you do need it. If you don't, you're going to install the supplied 1/8-inch pipe plug. And go ahead and put the boot on the end of your pipe. So once we've got all our intercooler piping on, you're going to go ahead and just adjust everything where you want it to be centered so that the pipes are all centered in the boots. Yes, this pipe does get close to the frame rail here, but there is adequate space as it doesn't move once you've got everything tight. It's a little tight on the alternator side right here too. So once you get everything centered, there is adjustment in all this. Once you get everything centered here, then we're going to go ahead and just torque down our intercooler hardware.
Next, you're going to grab your 6 3-inch T-bolt clamps and your 1 constant tension clamp.
Starting with your constant tension clamp, you're going to put this one right around the compressor boot right here. Put it around there and tighten it up. You can go ahead and just adjust your clamps where you want to tighten them down, and then just work your way down and tighten all the clamps down.
Next, you're going to grab your coolant reservoir, mounting brackets, hardware, and small coolant line, and 2 hose clamps.
Going to lay your flat bracket onto the back of the coolant reservoir. And this one is going to go on the back side of this one. Take your hose, put the 90-degree onto the already installed fitting. I'm going to remove this 13mm headed bolt right here on the frame rail of the car. And then before we tighten this clamp right here, you can actually lay your reservoir just down into place. And note that that hose is clocked correctly. So it's just right behind the throttle body connector and the side of the throttle body boot. You can go ahead and mount your coolant reservoir in place with the factory bolt. And we'll go ahead and just leave that loose for a minute, just a little bit, so that we can adjust the reservoir once we get it into place to where it needs to be. And we're going to want to make sure that this fitting, our 90-degree fitting, is parallel with these 2 hoses. You can go ahead and tighten that hose clamp. Then we're going to take our factory coolant hose and route it right down and plug it on to push it into place, and then put your factory clamp back into place. Locate your smaller of the 2 vent hoses and your clamp that says 12 to 14 on it. You can see it's a little long for the reservoir now, so what we're going to do is just trim it off, leaving ourselves a little slack. ahead and install your clamp. Route your hose up where it's not rubbing on anything. Tighten your clamp up. Hose that comes from the top of the valve cover, you're going to route it just nicely down here under the frame, and it's going to go onto that fitting right there. And then just go ahead and install that hose right onto that side of that fitting. After we've got our coolant reservoir installed, everything mounted, our hose clamps tight, there's a provided little clear vent hose that you can run on there, and then obviously then just zip tie it down to the side here with your other vent hose. You don't need a clamp on this. It's just a vent in case the car would ever were to overheat, or maybe you had a head gasket leak or something. There's never going to be anything or any pressure in this thing, and it's got kind of a little push lock fitting on it anyway, so the hose is very tight on it.
Next, you're going to locate your 4-inch to 3-inch intake adapter boot.
So what we're going to do with our 4-inch intake boot is just put it onto the air box where it goes in an approximate location. You're going to point it down kind of at the shock, which is where it's going to go. Then we're going to go in here and clock our reservoir and torque that bolt. Intake boot in place and our reservoir can still move. We are going to move the reservoir kind of as close as we can to that intake boot. Once that's done, you like the clearance, go ahead and torque this bolt down.
Next, you'll want to find your remaining 3 coolant hoses and your remaining clamps.
We'll slide one of your clamps onto your 90-degree hose, then we're going to plumb the rest of the pre-made hose. You want to make sure you route it down along the back of the firewall here where it doesn't interfere with anything. Install one of your hose clamps on the end. It's going to go on the fitting that's facing towards the engine. The 90-degree fitting, or the 90-degree hose end, goes on this end of the reservoir. Okay, once you get your hose routed down, the hole you cut, you get everything routed the way you like it, where there's no binding on any of the hose, go ahead and tighten your hose clamps up. Locate your other pre-molded hose or pre-fit hose here that's got the 180 and the 20 on it. This end's going to go to the cooler, and this end's going to go to the top side of the reservoir. Any ends on it, obviously. This is the one that's going to run down to the intercooler, and it's going to loop around towards the engine. It has a nice little window back there right between the intake boot on the clutch, and then just put that up the outlet of your water pump. So once you get your water pump oriented in this rubber grommet, you can actually turn it in the rubber grommet to orient where the hoses are, where your outlet hose is going to come out. Go ahead and tighten that clamp up as well. So now the outlet from our water pump is going to go to the forward fitting on your intercooler. Once you got that where you like it, go ahead and tighten that clamp as well. And the hose that we previously installed from the inlet on your fan cooler up there will run down the frame rail right here underneath the vent tube and connect to the back port on your intercooler. Once you've got that one where you like it, go ahead and tighten that clamp too. And once those are all routed where you like them, you can zip tie them, obviously, to anything that's not moving there. So next we're going to install our blow-off valve line to the turbo. We're going to find this fitting right here that's a quick connect that you just pinch the 2 connectors on the side of the throttle body, and just pinch those and pull that off.
Next, you'll want to source your 1/8-inch boost hose, your plastic fitting, and your 2 clamps.
Take one end of your boost hose, put it on your plastic quick connect fitting. Then we're going to install our quick connect fitting on the plug end you took off on the side of the throttle body. You need to route it down kind of in between the wiring harness and the fuel rail. And then we're actually going to zip tie this coolant hose that we've already hooked up with the boost hose. The rest of this hose is going to run back to the turbocharger to your blow-off valve. Which is right here, this fitting. So we're going to make what we think is a correct measurement for the hose to route correctly. and cut the end of the hose. Using our other hose clamp, I'm going to install that onto our blow-off valve fitting. Once that's on, we're going to go ahead and tighten that clamp. Then you can go ahead and zip tie this up right here to the bottom of the cross frame with your coolant hose.
Next, you're going to locate your 2 intake pipes, 2 intake boots, and 6 worm gear clamps.
Once again, guys, glass cleaner is your friend when you're working with these silicone boots. I'm going to go ahead and slide that up into your 45-degree pipe. As you can see, I've already put the clamp on this boot, the 4-inch clamp, and just left it loose. We're going to leave all those loose until we get everything adjusted where we want it. Take your 3x4 boot, we're going to slide it on the pipe about halfway. So you're going to have half on this pipe and half on the other pipe. Put your boot on the 90 on the other end here. Once again, glass cleaner is your friend. You should be able to start that end on the turbo and then adjust all this to where it'll go together. And put the rest of your clamps on and tighten them up.
So this is how your intake piping should look once installed. End up getting pretty close here. And just know that it does take a little bit of maneuvering to get it all fit together. So before putting your clamps on and tightening them, make sure you have it all fitting like you'd like it to before installing your clamps.
Locate this breather hose you've already taken off and then cut the zip tie hangers off of it. Basically, we're going to cut this down in the straight part and use it. And we're going to run from our valve cover right here, this nipple, right here to our intake. And then just use the 2 factory pinch clamps back on the hose once you have it fit. Cut that one at the white end there. Once you've installed your 2 pinch clamps back on the hose, like I said, we're just going to route that from there, the intake, right to your valve cover. So we're going to run the electrical portion of our fan and water pump next, which is all pre-made wiring harnesses. All you got to do is run them and just plug them into the bus bar up here. So the first thing we're going to do is take all the T40 Torx bolts out, take this front inner fender skirt off, and then we're going to take the side skirt off. Next, we're going to remove this panel. We're just going to remove all the little pop clips. Now we've accessed the place where we're actually going to mount our relay module and finish running all our wiring.
Next, you're going to find your pre-made relay module with harness as well as hardware.
Next, you're going to find just this middle spot area here to mount your relay harness. It's not fussy, obviously. It's going to be behind the panel and it's high enough up the car that it's out of harm's way of any of the elements. Just go ahead and mark 2 holes. And using your 8/32 Allen bolts, just go ahead and put them through the holes in the relay module. And install your nuts and washers on the back side of that panel and tighten them up. Once you've got your relay module on mounted and everything, we're going to run this harness all the way up to the factory bus bar where it's just going to plug in easy power ground key on. So we're just going to route that up, run it down along the frame rail, and then it's going to run down here along the, and then you're just going to route it right up here, right up under the dashboard and plug it into the bus bar. Obviously, make sure when you're all done and everything's routed correctly, zip tie it all up nicely. So once that wire's run down into the dash, your factory's actually got a power and ground bus bar here. And we're just going to remove one of these caps and plug that connector right into there.
Next, you're going to find your pre-made power cable.
So to hook our power cable up we're going to access this fuse block right back here. Once again, popping off the pop clip and removing the cover. Then we're going to hook our power cable into the bottom post on that. Your power post is up here in the top, obviously. Remove that nut and that lock washer. Hook the small eyelet of your power cable to that post. Once you tighten your power cable down, or the post, I should say the nut on the post, go ahead and run your power cable down the inside of the plastic right along the frame here. And then we can actually zip tie it to this other harness right here and just run it down nicely and hook it in to your upper or your lower post right here and zip tie it to those other battery cables. Obviously, if you haven't disconnected your batteries, which we do recommend doing before you do this, be very careful that you don't touch metal sockets, the metal parts. And then once you get that routed how you'd like, so it's kind of sitting nicely with the other cables, we'll go ahead and tighten our nut back up. And then you can kind of reinstall your boot, your protective boot, back over the battery post.
Next, you're going to find your pre-made water pump wiring harness.
Just along the frame. Obviously, once again, you can zip tie this to an existing harness that's back here. Your ground will be able to come out of the harness. Your ground is actually going to go to this bolt right here. So make sure you can just pull the ground so you have slack out enough to get your water pump power hooked to one of the small bottom posts on your relay module. And then we're going to remove our bolt here to hook up our ground. You do want to make sure, you'll notice there's some paint on top of this area here where we're going to put our eyelet. If you get a little bit of sandpaper or buffer pad, just give the paint a little scuff so you make sure you get a good ground contact there. I'm going to leave that loose for just a minute because our fan grounds will come down and hook to that same point.
Next, you're going to locate both fan wiring harnesses.
So your two fan harnesses are obviously going to go to the same location. Both the grounds are going to go right here with your water pump ground, and both your little power eyelets are going to go over here to your relay module on this little post. We're going to take the two connectors and the hole that we actually made for the intercooler hose to come down. We're going to run those connectors up through that hole. Once you've run them up out of the hole there, obviously you're going to run them over to your fan connectors. And it doesn't matter where each connector goes, you can just plug it into whichever one. And then obviously, once again, we can zip tie our wiring harness to the fan shroud, zip tie it back here, and then make it go along the back of the speaker and bed here so it's out of the way of the bed completely of taking it in and out. Okay, and then once you've got your grounds pulled out of the harness sufficiently, obviously we're going to hook them all up. You can just stack them and twist them. The other small eyelet. And once again, you kind of orient these splayed apart from each other so they're not stacked off each other. And once you like how everything's routed, obviously we're going to go ahead and zip tie all this and make it look nice. And locate your two supplied fuses. Once you've got all of everything tight and everything's nice and power's running, you can go ahead and hook your fuses up to the post right under the relay. And this car obviously was a fresh build. Sent the ECM in to get it unlocked. The ECM came preloaded with the file in it, which we can do for you. If not, you need to put your own tuning in it, obviously. We're We're just going to go ahead and hook the factory connectors back up. Get them locked into place. And then using your factory hardware, remount your ECM. Once that's done, obviously we can put our panel back on over here, as well as when you're done running your wiring over there for your relay module, both these panels can go back up. Once you've double checked your work and everything's complete, we're just gonna go ahead and fill our fluids back up. You're gonna need a little bit of 50-50 green antifreeze mix. We're gonna go ahead and fill our reservoir up. You only want it to come up about a quarter of the way up the reservoir, and obviously you're only gonna have to look down inside of it with maybe a flashlight or something just to double check that, but it's not gonna take much, maybe just a quart or two. And then once you've started it up, obviously, and warmed it up and gone through a couple of heat cycles, go ahead and just check this again and make sure that your coolant is about a quarter of the way up the reservoir. You're also gonna fill your intercooler system with a 50-50 antifreeze mix as well. And same thing with this system, we're only gonna fill this about halfway up once it's full. You'll be able to turn your key on, which will turn the water pump on and cycle water through the system. You'll actually be able to see it flowing back here through the return hose. You may have to cycle the key a couple of times and just check it to make sure it's full once it gets all the air out of it.
Next, you're going to find your boost gauge and controller setup. You're going to have your wiring harness, your gauge and pod, your miscellaneous fittings, and your boost tubing. This gauge is already installed in the dual pod setup. Depending on what you purchased, your gauge pod may only have a single pod. This customer opted for a 2-pod setup to be able to run an AFR gauge.
So you can grab your gauge pod and everything, install it on the dash, use this as the template to drill your mounting holes. Once you've got that done, you're going to drill the hole in the dash to come through, for your wiring to come through. Make sure that there's a bracket back here. Make sure you've looked on the back side of the dash and marked it so that you don't drill into the metal bracket. Then we're going to run our wires for our gauges through the hole. And we're going to run our boost line down for now. Once you get your boost line fed down in there, obviously you're going to go ahead and just plug all your gauges, all the connectors in for your gauges. Go ahead and make sure your boost line is not kinked at all. None of your wiring harness is kinked. Allen bolt mounting hardware with our little rubber blind nuts. And mount your gauge pod. You've got 2 legs of your harness coming off of the boost controller. The long one obviously is going to run back to the car to the boost solenoid. And then you've got your factory bus connector. You're just going to go ahead and run up into your dash and plug into your bus bar. Once you've got your boost line and your wiring harness coming out under the dash here, where you want to go, you've got your other wiring that we're going to just run these down the side of the car with the other wiring. And then we're going to run these 2 lines right up this wiring harness, right here upside of the car, and zip tie it all up. If you run them along the other wiring harness, it goes right alongside the back side of the motor, right down the side of the valve cover on the intake manifold side and right to the turbocharger. So we run our boost reference line for our boost controller and our control solenoid wiring harness just right along the wiring harness on the back side of the engine. We're going to run it up here and zip tie it to the blow-off valve line that comes down to the turbocharger here. And your wiring harness is going to plug into the boost control solenoid that's right on the front of the turbo, on the compressor housing of the turbocharger. It's got a little lock, it'll just click in place. We're going to install some pipe thread sealant on the 90-degree fitting that goes into our intercooler pipe, and then go ahead and just snug that fitting up. We're going to locate your little pinch clamp, and you're going to have to cut your boost line. You're going to have some excess. You're going to end up having to cut a little bit with a razor blade or something, make a nice straight cut. once you've got your length, and then we're going to hook our boost line up to our nipple there. If we put a little bit of glass cleaner on this nipple, this line is a little bit tight for that, just because we don't want it ever coming off. And we'll install our clamp on there. Just like so. Once you've got your wiring harness and your boost line and everything all zip tied up nice, go down, zip tie everything up on the side of the car, and go ahead and put your side panels back on and your front fender back on, and you're done. Using your exhaust cover as a template, drill 3 holes in the desired location for your exhaust cover. Using supplied 1032 Allen bolt hardware, attach your exhaust cover to your rear cover, if so desired to install. So guys, just a quick video on setting up your AEM True Boost controller. Make sure when you're ready to drive the car or test it, it's on a dyno or you're in a closed course or something. Don't go do this in your neighborhood. The gauge is going to come out of the box in the off setting. The A button right here will toggle between the off, your A, and your B settings. If you just hold it down for 3 seconds, you can see now we're on our A setting. It'll tell us the duty cycle, it's at 0, which we'll go into the setup on that later. Hold it down again, it goes to B. Hold it down again, it goes back to off. When the gauge is in off, it's going to be set, it's going to go to just max default, and it's just going to go to wastegate spring pressure, which should be 8 psi. The turbo should only make around 8 to 9 pounds of boost. From there, we're going to go into our program mode. You hold down both the A and the B button at the same time. When it says program come up, you hold that down again. It's going to go into your units. Obviously, we're going to work with PSI. You hit the 2 buttons again, that's your scramble boost. I'm probably never going to use this in this setup, so we're just going to go through that. The SCT is scramble boost time. The alarm right here is what you want your peak boost set at, or the alarm where the gauge, the boost controller, is going to basically turn the boost off if it sees over this much boost for 2 seconds. So normally you want to set this at 12 to 13 psi. Once again, hit your 2 buttons. This is the open pressure for the wastegate. This turbo makes boost so fast that we just leave this at 1, which is the lowest setting it'll go on to help prevent boost spikes. The full is what your gauge is going to sweep to on your little LEDs here. Obviously you can set that wherever you want. We hit it again. We can see that our A setting is now at 25. This is the duty cycle. We're changing up and down. Usually you're going to end up somewhere in the 25 to 35 range on the duty cycle. Obviously, like I said, you're going to go have to see how much boost your car makes depending on your setup and your altitude. And you can use the B setting for a high altitude tune or a low altitude tune, versus whatever you're doing there. We hit our 2 buttons again, it goes to our B duty cycle. Hit our 2 buttons again, it goes to run. It's now ready to run. You hit the A button again, you can see that it's off. We're going to hold that down for 3 seconds. That'll go to our A setting, which you can see now you're ready to run. So on A, our duty cycle set at 25. Basically your duty cycle is going to be the wastegate control, how this controls the wastegate. The more duty cycle you give it, the more boost it's going to make. And these aren't necessary, it doesn't correlate with boost numbers. That's not going to be 37 pounds of boost. And if you turn it down 2%, that's not going to exactly be 2 pounds of boost. It varies from setting to setting. So basically, the lower the duty cycle as we go down, the lower the boost is going to be. The higher the boost is going to be. And like I said, you'll probably end up right in that 25 to 35 range on your duty cycle setting.